My name is Major Steve Briones. I go by Tiger, and I think Trigger is running around doing some stuff with AFWERX. So I think he may jump in this conversation in a little bit. But basically, just kind of want to take you through a little bit of what pilot training transformation is. We've heard a lot, or if anybody's been in these circles for a while, heard a lot about pilot training next, and I just kind of want to talk about some of the challenges that we face, kind of where we came from, and then also the challenges of actually scaling some of these things and some of those roadblocks. So hopefully we can provide some kind of advice to folks that are going to be in that same boat in the not too distant future. So with that being said, we'll just get going. All right, so the first thing, where we've been. And so in 2018, General Quas, then AATC commander, basically stood up this pilot training next experiment. And it was kind of like skunkworks, like, they went out and tried to figure out if there's a better, faster, cheaper way to make an Air Force pilot. And so they, started to look at things like virtual reality or immersive technology, and then also seeing if they could do this in a single track. And so they went out there, and so far they've gone through 2 iterations of it, kind of with varying levels of success. But I guess the big thing to point out there is that we've learned a lot along the way. And so sorry, went a little too far. Yeah, we've learned a lot along the way. And so before coming to 19th Air Force, I was actually at Shepherd Air Force Base, basically running a spark cell. And so that's where I met Trigger and plenty of other folks around the UPT circles. And we started doing basically the same thing. So that divergent discovery period here from 2018 to 2019, everybody just basically has been given that innovation dollars or SIF, and they went out and bought things and stuff, and they put it all together and said, yeah, okay, let's this will work. And so for lack of a better way to explain it, everybody went out to Amazon, as far as pilot training goes, and they just bought a whole bunch of computer parts and sticks and throttles and slapped it together and says, yes, all right, this works. And I think what ended up, the good part that came out of that was, we all started this organic crosstalk just kind of started. And I think I remember doing the first AFWERX Spark Collider event. I think it was in the fall of 2018. Was basically where everybody just kind of got together. And then shortly thereafter, everybody that was focused on pilot training, making pilot training better from each of the bases started kind of coming together. And so we started kind of self-organizing in what we called a virtuous insurgency. And so we kind of loosely formed ourselves together, and with representation here at 19th Air Force and being able to speak to the then commander. And then basically, we went out and tried to scale it. And so we learned a lot of things. We learned a lot of things not to do. Scaling before you're ready is a big challenge, especially if you don't have the support and the infrastructure to sustain or to basically support your efforts going forward. That's a big challenge. So everybody kind of went out on their own during that period, and then basically, again, through varying levels of success. And so I came out here to 19th Air Force into a newly kind of created position. At the time, we called it Director of Innovation, but now we're actually a 19th Air Force A5 that is focused primarily on strategy transformation and integration, specific to pilot training transformation. So what we call the convergence, so our new commander came in and basically took all the inputs of what everything was going on at the different places, this divergent discovery period, and kind of came up with, we need to start converging all these efforts together, and we need to start kind of marching towards the same direction, at least put us on converging vectors. And so that's kind of what happened this fall. Yeah, that's what happened this fall, and that's kind of what we're moving out on. So the big takeaways from Pilot Training Next, that Pilot Training Next is the future. So everything that they are experimenting with technology-wise, virtual reality. Those are the types of things. That is the way that pilot training is going to go, because we have access to technology and new learning methods that we hadn't had in the last 2 or 3 years. So technology is just kind of getting better and better, and in some cases, we're outpacing the industry, which is awesome. But also something to take into account is that pilot training next is the future. So there are some aspects that are here now, and then there's some aspects that are not. So we're going to kind of go through that and figuring out. So that was kind of our team's role, is to figure out what's ready to scale and what's not. So we'll go into UPT 2.5, what that is, but that is the plan to scale the lessons learned from pilot training next. And the overall objective is not to make them faster and to make more of them, but the first objective is literally to make our students better, because we have access to immersive technology, and we have access to things and stuff that we just didn't have a few years back. So making them better first, then faster is probably a closer result of that. So one of the things that 19th Air Force has adopted is this UPT spectrum of awesome. So if you walk through it from left to right, UPT 1.0 is what we started out with, the 2 airplane track of the T-37 and the T-38 all the way up until 1992. Then what we have, if you consider what we have right now at present, so our T6 and then splitting off into 2 tracks, a T-38 and T1, a UPT 2.0, that's kind of what we're doing now. And then if you look all the way to the right, the UPT 3.0, that's what's in the future as biometrics start to get more relevant in training, being able to inform our decisions as the T7 comes online, as artificial intelligence gets better for our particular use case. That's off into the future. And so also highlighting PTN, that particular experiment that started in 2018 and is continuing today and is now in its 3rd iteration, flying the T6 Bravo, and now aligned with this pilot training transformation effort. Then you have the APTX, Advanced Pilot Training Experiment, and basically what that's still very early, and what we're trying to do there is trying to take some of the lessons learned of when we started to bring in new airplanes like the T6 to replace the T-37. We want to make sure we don't repeat the same or fall into the same traps that we did in the past of just slapping in a new airplane into the same training methodology. So that's specific for the T7, and so that is still very early and very pre-decisional. And so that gets us to UPT 2.5. And so UPT 2.5 is basically a new way of training pilots, taking the lessons learned of pilot training next, and putting them and basically updating what we call the factory floor. And so if you look at pilot training transformation, it encompasses a few things. So it'll encompass your PTN, your UPT 2.5, APTX, when and if that does come off the ground, UPT 3.0 way off into the future, but also the container on the bottom left, the early access piece of how do we start to left load training, or how do we start to make relevant training available to pilot training or pilot candidates before they actually get to pilot training. So that way, when they actually get to UPT 2.5, their experience is that much more efficient, or they're able to get through that program a lot more efficient. So that's kind of the umbrella. If pilot training transformation is the umbrella, those are the things that we're considering underneath the umbrella. So we bring up this slide, and this particular slide talks about the relationship between pilot training next, the production pipeline, and also ATC 19th Air Force specifically. And so if we think of pilot training next as, Thomas Edison tinkering around in the lab, just trying to create, sparks flying everywhere, just trying to create a light bulb, like your skunk works, so they're out there investigating advanced learning or different learning methods using a different aircraft with advanced avionics in a very small use case type scenario. And they've been doing that for now going on their third year. And there are some things that have come out of that that are um, informing what we're going to be doing on the production pipeline. So if you look at UPT 2.5, that's our factory floor. And so for a long time, that factory floor has been that Henry Ford model, just cranking out the same, just cranking out pilots, and the quality, their methods really didn't change. Your factory floor did not update. So what UPT 2.5 is trying to do is to update that factory floor, to take us from a Ford type factory floor model to more something like a Tesla, or, name whatever, 21st century factory floor there. And so one of the key parts of updating that factory floor has been the efforts of that divergent discovery, those innovation flights, or innovation flights. So every wing or every pilot training base has an innovation flight that has applied, sorry about this, that has applied some of these learning methods, some of the sparks that have come out of pilot training next, gone through 19th Air Force, and are actually executing right now. So some are further ahead than others, but suffice it to say, they're kind of their own little, you don't want to say experiment because that's not the right word, but they're their own effort actually in a production engine to see about how this can actually translate to updating the production floor. So we've seen a lot of success there. And then we see 19th Air Force and AETC, specifically 19th Air Force A5 is right, my team is right there in the middle of just being able to take inputs from both the from UPT 2.5 or the production pipeline, your innovation flights, and also pilot training next, and come up with a way to figure out what is the next thing that's ready to scale. What is the more polished thing that is ready to update that factory floor? So that's kind of the relationship between pilot training next and what we're trying to do with UPT 2.5 and this whole pilot training transformation effort. So some of the lessons learned that which ultimately guided our for UPT 2.5's objectives are seamless access to content, immersive technology, or integrating immersive technology, transition to a student-centered learning, basically allowing them to learn at their own pace, and then also quality instructors or delivering quality instruction. So those are some of the things that we found that are most mature and ready to scale. But the things down there at the bottom, that our system, for one reason or another, is just not ready for scale. So this competency versus time thing, we are working towards that. It requires a bigger lift culturally and also to the big system to allow us to get there. The collection and use of data. So one of the things that we've learned from pilot training next, and also the other efforts, is that data is gold. And basically, if we're trying to see whether or not the time in VR, the time in immersive technology actually correlates to proficiency happening faster or sooner, we need the data to back that up. And so we need a method to be able to capture that, and more importantly, to be able to process that and actually turn it into information that we can digest and also make decisions off of. AI intelligence or artificial intelligence is a tool that we would like to lean on in the future. However, right now for our transformation use case, it's just not that as mature to go out and scale, but we are making investments into doing that. Biometrics also being another one. So just think if you can if you can associate heart rate, pupil dilation, um, oxygen, your pulse ox and all that kind of stuff, you put that into and you collect all that data from your student, and then being able to assess whether or not they were actually learning during that time, or maybe this isn't the best time to actually introduce something, or just to find out when the students just shut down. That's a lot of really important data that can inform how we do things going forward. So this is kind of the vision going forward based on our 4 objectives on the bottom right. Is this synchronized user experience? Is that a student is given, they find out that they're going to pilot training, they're given an iPad and or a login, and they were able to log in and start accessing and unlocking some of that content. So some of the stuff, basics of fundamentals of flying, whether it's weather or basic instrument procedures, or there's plenty of stuff that's out there that has applicability to pilot training that can be basically learned ahead of time, or actually before arriving at pilot training. Then you have the immersive technology, so in the form of what we're calling as immersive training device, or an ITD. It's basically where you jump into a virtual T6, virtual T38, or virtual T1 and get your reps before you actually get to the airplane. And we found that that those reps actually are pretty meaningful before you actually get to the airplane. So when you do actually get up and start flying, your body or your brain is telling you, hey, I've been here before, and your reps become that much more meaningful. And so this synchronized user experience, everything lives in the cloud. So it's that whole data architecture of just taking inputs from your aircraft performance, your academics performance, and also from the immersive training device, and then all being accessible by every student, every instructor, so that way we can save time and more importantly tailor that instruction appropriately to each student without a significant demand on the instructor. So UPT 2.5 specifically, here's some of our scaling projects and some of the things that we are actively going after. So we decided to partner with DIU. So this is the divergent discovery coming back together in convergence. And so we figured out what we knew we were going to need to scale, and basically getting us on the same sheet of music is what we're trying to do. And so what that means is a common device, the data and network architecture, an AI flight instructor, and also a method to deliver our academics from a cloud solution. So we decided to partner with DIU because we feel that this particular problem is not just Air Force alone. It has applicability to any flying training or any pilot training across the DoD. So DIU decided to take us on, and since then we're able to put out a commercial services offering, and which attracted about 53 companies, and we've been able to whittle that down to 20, and we're just about to within the next month or two award contracts going forward to get us a prototype, a synchronized user experience, a prototype of what that's going to look like here within the next month. So that's been really exciting, that going forward. Another thing that we're really interested in is the electronic flight bag. So most of the flyers, if there's on the line, know what that is. The EFB it's a fairly mature program. We know what it is, but at the same time, we know what it isn't. And so one of the things that's going to allow us to unlock that capability of that particular device is this concept of enterprise mobile management. And so AETC is working really hard to bring that program online, establish it as a program of record, and get an ATO that will basically allow us to transition to mobile device management, reduce the burden of the on-site EFB guy or gal that's in the squadron, having to sync up iPads, making sure they're up to date. Now all that's so with MDM, that allows us to do that kind of from afar, and kind of reduce that burden on the instructors, which is something that's going to be really important. Also, what that does is it allows us to put identity management, so our mobile identity management. So allow us to put our soft certs to be able to get access to things like our email, our DTS, single sign-on type, anything that requires single sign-on now puts that in our hands of the EFB. So the example I like to talk about is if you were to go out on a cross country, meaning you take off on Friday with a student, you fly 2 or 3 sorties, and then you land at an out base, and then you're flying, I think, a total of anywhere from between 5 and 6 sorties over the weekend. That's a lot of grade sheets and a lot of time. So right now in our current model, that forces us to, us as instructors, forces us to input all those grade sheets after we get back on Sunday, after we've had a long weekend away. So by giving us that capability to have a grade sheet on our iPad, and more importantly, being able to validate who we are through the identity management piece, allows us to create those grade sheets and then have it talk to a learning management system in the cloud while we're actually on the road. So we hope that that's going to save us a lot of time, or at least that change in the way that we do things. So EMM is going to be a big thing for AETC going forward, and 19th Air Force EFB is going to be the first beneficiary of that. The next thing, live ATC in a virtual environment. So when we started flying around in the virtual environment, so in your T6, there really wasn't much. You kind of had to create your own scenario. Basically, you could go as far as your imagination took you. And so now, in that same environment, you're able to download a plugin and a service, and basically you're getting live ATC. A live controller is actually talking to you, giving you real-time controlling, and also being able to generate real-time scenarios that really push your decision making, your situational awareness in the virtual environment, basically making those reps in the virtual environment even that much more impactful. As we go down the list, infrastructure is kind of the next one. So what we realize is that most bases, as Randolph specifically, is not necessarily structured for this. The infrastructure is not really structured or conducive to additional things that require more electrical, more computers, or more computing power creates heat. And so there are HVAC challenges in our squadrons that we just kind of didn't even really, when you think about buying this stuff off of Amazon, you didn't think that would be an impact, but then you start to put 15 or 20 of these in a room, and it starts to really become a concern that you don't have enough cooling to make these things run. Then also layout of the buildings. So what we found that our spaces are not 21st century considerate, because most of our buildings were built a long time ago. I think here at Randolph specifically, many of these buildings are from the 40s, 50s, and these hangars are 60s, 70s. So being able to optimize our layout for this new technology, for this new methods of learning, is something that we need to take in consideration. So we're making investments into updating the infrastructure where it makes sense. One of the aspects of instruction or remote instruction, or the ability to deliver instruction remotely is really important. And so we're looking at adding that capability into the ITD, which is a lot easier because it's an open system, and it has a network card that's able to connect to a commercial internet source. But we're also looking into the ability to connect that to our legacy systems and really kind of unlock that potential there. So that's another thing that we're taking a look at. The enterprise commercial internet. So I think most of us are starting to realize that, the way we live and the way we work, we expect there to be an internet connection everywhere we go. And so, and over time, the way we live and the way we work have started to come together, but it usually stops at the gate. Um, so most of these new bases, or most of the bases, are starting to get updates, kind of incrementally, of commercial internet capability. AETC in particular invested in what's called the Learning Wi-Fi service, installed across 17 locations. And so that happened so quickly. While it's great to get internet, the requirements weren't really defined as well as we needed them to be. So we're dealing with bandwidth limitations, and we're also dealing with kind of policy limitations as well. So what we're actively doing is working with the ATC Learning Wi-Fi team to optimize that and to increase bandwidth, increase wireless access points. Yes, specifically here for Randolph, but more importantly for the ATC Learning Wi-Fi and as an enterprise. And so the last thing, academic content optimization. So when we look at our academic content, is traditionally delivered in a CBT format. And so where you sit at a AFNet computer, and it's just you and that computer, and that's the only way that you can complete your CBTs, for pilot training in particular. So what we've now done with one of the objectives is trying to provide seamless access to content. So putting stuff in the cloud. So using something like a box with an IL4 accreditation, or just putting anything in the cloud. Now you take that stuff and cut and paste and putting it up there. While yes, you have access, but it's not necessarily optimized for the formats that we expect, whether it's an iPad, your MacBook, your iPhone, your Android, whatever, the content is not optimized for that. And so also the other thing is when we talk about immersive technology, so you take a VR headset, you take a standalone VR headset like an Oculus Quest or something like that, there's a lot of learning that could be done in there. However, there's a lot of development that needs to happen to our academics to be optimized for that particular device. So one of the efforts that we're doing is we're taking a look at all of our academics, and we'll start with the T6 first, and we're going to deliver it in multiple methods. And so there are people that learn best by reading, visual, if we were talking videos, there's immersive content. So if you just imagine a singular course that's now able to be delivered across multiple mediums, or multiple methods of getting the same information, that's what we're striving towards. And so it requires a big investment. And I think most of us that have been starting to look at this VR technology realize that it's all well and good if we get all this technology, we hook it up, and once you get there, now what? So the content is really key and can't be overlooked. And so that's kind of the big scaling projects that we're taking a look at. Oops. Cool. All right. Well, that's the formal part of this, and I think we have some let's see. We have kind of a question and answer. So I have the Q&A box up here, and let me stop sharing the screen. And all right, awesome. I'm going to just go through some of the Q&As. If anybody wants to come up on voice or type in anything. Let's see. All right, I don't know. Danielle, you want to check me on time to make sure I have enough time still? Okay, I don't really have any questions. Or who's a good POC for FTU Next? Okay, let's see, FTU Next. So I know that was a big effort. I'm going to throw out some names, and if you guys are on the line, sorry for throwing you guys under the bus, but there's these are just people that I know. Megan Booz, she goes by Slack. So she is out of the F-15E training squadron. I know she's really big into FTU Next. If you want, so Greg, I'll go ahead and forward you along any kind of contacts that I get from this most recent AFWERX FTU Next event. help out there. Cool. All right, here we go. Here's another one. We started looking into sim options for the next generation training aircraft. I'm assuming we're talking about stuff like T7 and stuff like that. So from my perspective, the contracts have already been kind of already pre-coordinated or already been decided for the ground-based training systems. But what's great about what we're learning now is that in this particular case, Boeing is is open to having us out, and I fully intend to kind of inform them of what we're trying to do with pilot training transformation. And I think it only makes sense to be able to to deliver the T7 capability in that same way. Cool. All right, great. Got your email, and I'll get that over to you. Danielle, I think I'm out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you. Thanks, everybody. If you need anything, my contact information, I'm sure will be available as well.